We've been doing it for years. You need to come.
To a clinic on this. I know you just ate, so to keep you from falling asleep, I want to do just a quick exercise here. So if you stand up. I know, so sorry. This little section right here, we're going to call this nuclear waste, okay? You cannot stay in the middle. I'm going to give you some choices, like you like green or you like blue, and you can say, I'm a Presbyterian, I like both. But you have to pick one, okay? You can't be in the middle of the road, you got to pick one. So you'll just physically move to one side or the other, but you can't stay in the middle. Now, I know Presbyterians enough to know that you probably, or somebody's going to stay in the middle. And if you do, grace abounds. Nuclear waste will be eating your body. Okay, you ready? There's a crisis today among youth in the church. Okay? There is not a crisis among youth in the church. Move to one side or the other. Go. Hate to make you think right after lunch.
That's crisis.
Crisis is over here, not a crisis over here. You feel a little tentative.
Yeah, but I'm not in the nuclear waste.
No, I'm so proud of you. Okay. Everybody in your spot? You feel good? Okay. You guys say there's a crisis. How come?
Drugs.
Okay, kids, you got this whole drug problem. Absolutely. Good. What else?
Church isn't like church used to be. Church has changed.
Yeah, George, say more about that. Church is changing.
For young people,
yeah.
they're not geared the same way we older people are, and they're not attracted to it as easily as...
Yeah, kids are not naturally as attracted to church in the ways that they might have been 2-3 generations ago. Yeah, good. One more. There's a crisis. How come? Yeah.
What they learn is sort of gamey stuff instead of how to solve problems or answer serious questions.
Okay, so they're playing a lot of games, but they may not be getting any more capacity to navigate the difficulty of what it's like to live as a Christian or as a teenager, or as a Christian teenager.
Another simple. They're not brought to church by their parents.
Their parents are often not coming themselves, which can be a crisis. Yeah. Okay, you guys say, oh, y'all are so negative. There is not a crisis. How come? Why would you say there's not a crisis?
The youth that do come are more invested than maybe they used to be, because they're coming by choice. So the conversations I'm having now than maybe when I was in high school are a lot deeper than they used to be.
Fascinating. The kids that do come because they want to, and so there's a deeper level of investment and engagement. Great. Not a crisis. How come?
We have to redefine church and ministry in general, and in that way, it wouldn't look like a crisis.
Yeah,
it would look like a redefinition.
We're really redefining what church needs to look like, and in fact, kids are inviting us. We're being invited by their presence or their absence to reconsider what church is. Yeah, great.
What's being defined as crisis has been around for 50 years.
Okay.
We've been in crisis for 50 years, but there's been good, powerful ministry with youth that's taken place in the last 50 years. I see kids today who have far deeper spiritual values at 16 than I had at 16.
Or that
I'd call that positive.
Yeah. Okay.
So no more than you did.
They know where I do now.
Okay. Next question. Kids today are different than they were a generation ago. Kids today are the same as they were a generation ago. Go. They're different, they're the same. Go. Some of y'all are just anchored in your spot.
I had to think about that one.
They're different, they're the same.
I have to go all the way around. That's not
This
fair.
moving coming. Good.
Which one's which?
This is different. This is the same. Okay, y'all say they're different. How come?
I don't know if they would be inherently different. It might be a nature-nurture thing, but I would say they're different because of the nurture. They just have a deal with teenagers that have, they're just more connected than they've ever been. You know, I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm not an old chicken. But when I was a child, I didn't have. Sorry, it's general. It doesn't but I didn't have the ability to pick up something in my pocket that enabled me to get in touch with 100 people And I don't know if that makes them different, it just makes their situation
Okay.
different.
Certainly their context is different, and you're up in the air about whether they're different. Okay?
I know policemen who will say kids are different over 20 years. They see kids have less moral restraint and less guilt and less, they'll just shoot you for pocket change instead of robbing you and running away.
Wow. Okay. Okay. One more thing.
They're brighter. They are more educated. The biggie is they're much, much more tech savvy. They are more shallowly connected to their peers. Does that make sense?
Shallowly.
Yeah.
That's a good
I made a
word.
word.
Yeah. I think we all know what you mean, though. Y'all say, no, they're the same. How come?
I think kids are kids to some extent. I think we overthink it sometimes. I mean, an 8-year-old is still an 8-year-old in a lot of ways. And maybe their context is different, so you have to approach them differently, but I think when you're 8, you still want the same things that now you used to.
Okay, so their environment may be different, but kids are basically
Their
the same.
nature is the same.
Okay. One more? Kids are the same? Y'all agree?
I think
I noticed you made a move across the aisle.
I made a move here. Because I think kids still want to be accepted, to be loved, for somebody to tell them that they're worth something. And I think that has not changed over time.
Yeah, but they still have the same belongings. For
Right.
acceptance and belonging, all that stuff. Great. Okay, last one. Youth ministry is harder than it was a generation ago, or easier than it was a generation ago? Okay? It's harder or it's easier? Yeah. Had to come. Had to come. Oh, wow. That's a movie going.
I just want to be different, is all. Now I'm
Okay.
going to have to think of it.
Okay, you guys say it's harder. How come?
There's no social expectations to be involved in church.
So it used to be a generation ago, it was normal. The wave of the culture was, of course, you go to church. Now it's more like, if you go, you're going to choose it.
Yeah.
There's not a natural path. Wow. Have a revival on the liberal side of the room. Actually, it's conservative side. Okay, so one more. It's harder. How come?
I think they have more competition for their time. All that going on. Pulls them away from the church.
Yeah. They used to be Sunday night.
Wednesday night.
That's where you want to be. I mean, where else are you going to be? Sitting home watching Leave It Beaver? Okay, y'all say, actually it's easier. How come?
I think there's more resources to draw on than there used to be, and there's a lot stronger. I think there are a lot more people who are invested in youth ministry for its own sake than there used to be. So the people who are doing it are better at it,
Yeah.
or at least more. They've got more skills.
They're
They've
more
been trained.
informed. Yeah.
More, yeah.
Okay.
If we can learn how to communicate with them, they are more receptive.
Okay.
But we have to find a way to do that.
Okay. But you're seeing there's a receptivity in young people now that's better than it was a generation ago. Right? Now you're intentionally in the middle. There's probably a reason for that.
I think the rest, I guess, is better.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
The kids, I've got 2 grandkids, 12 and 11. iPods, there's continually, it's television, when they go to the church on Sunday night, they're very attentive there, but they slip those things out. They come out to the car with them, looking at them. The kids today, people are, adults as well, are so bound up. They don't communicate anymore. They go across from one couch to another, talking to each other on these gadgets.
Just across the room.
They're unable.
Gotta go to the moon
They're
first.
unable to face each other face to face.
Yeah.
Many of them.
They've got the earbuds, and
Yeah.
you can't talk to them.
Right.
Yeah, makes it a little more, you tilt toward the difficult side. It's hard, yeah. Okay, y'all, you may have decided you really like the place you're sitting, but you can spread back out. Let me just kind of get a sense of our team today. How many of you have grandchildren? Okay, you got great. Anybody else have great grandchildren? Congratulations. You're the only one. Congratulations. How many of you have teenagers in your house right now? I mean, not at this moment, but okay, you're the only one. Go figure that. How many of you have children of any age? Okay, whether they are grown adults or they're babies. Okay, most everybody's got children. How many of you have kids under like pre-adolescent, so 11 and younger in the house?
Grandchildren? Oh,
okay. But you got those grandchildren that are about that age. Are any of you actually working in a program with teenagers right now? Yeah? What are you doing?
I voluntarily lead the Presbyterian youth program.
Okay, so you lead the Presbyterian Youth Council and all those programs. That's awesome. I hear it's pretty awesome.
It's fun.
Like 25 kids or so involved on that council? On the council?
Yep.
That's fabulous. And Eric, what do you do?
I do your history here.
You lead the youth group here at this church. Okay. What else?
I'm the chair of Christian Ed, and we are planning things all the time.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Hey, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. One more's coming. She's about 3-4 minutes away.
Oh, fabulous. What's your name?
Stephen Hobbs. I'm a deacon at local Presbyterian.
Awesome. Stephen, we're glad you're here. Now, who's coming just a second?
And then Sue O'Neill is coming also.
Okay, is there a way that we could, make a nice welcome for Sue when she comes in?
Yeah, please do that.
Anybody have any ideas of what would be meaningful for Sue?
I've got something.
What do you got, Steve?
I'm thinking we all just say hello, Sue, at the same time. I think it'd be great.
Okay, here's the deal. Y'all are going to have to be watching as she comes in, but I'm going to do this. All right? And when I do, y'all are all going to turn around and say, hello, Sue. Okay, so let's just practice that one time. I'll be talking along like this. And
hello, sir.
hello. Okay, you have to be a little bit more. What are you talking about? Okay, we'll try it one more time. I'll be talking along, and I'm just going to be talking and talking and talking. Sue's going to come in, and I'm going to notice Sue's coming in, and I'm just going to go like this. Oh, that's fabulous. That is fantastic. Well, part of what I want you to, I'm going to tell you what I want you to walk out of here with before we start. Okay? I want you to walk out of here feeling like we actually have a huge advantage in our churches in terms of the way we might be able to work with our kids. There's just a couple of you that are actually running programs. And one of the biggest, this is crazy, one of the biggest impediments to youth ministry is that we think we have to run a program to do youth ministry. And by the time we're done today, I hope you have a sense of, oh, I think I can do youth ministry. And you'll have some sort of way that you feel like, I think I and our church, perhaps, in some different ways, can begin to think about doing youth ministry. So I just want to be clear, just because you're not leading a Sunday school class or a youth group or a small group or a Presbyterian council, that doesn't mean that somebody else is responsible for youth ministry. Because we're in the same tradition. And on Sunday mornings, I'm sure it's here somewhere, Sunday morning, there's a baptismal font here somewhere.
No.
We don't do that?
Down the hallway.
Oh,
I need this.
we have to bring it in.
Yes.
Okay, but you do bring it in.
Yes.
So when we do baptisms, we, of course, parents make vows, but who else makes a vow? Congregation. And we don't say, we would like to offer up the human sacrifice of some volunteers to help in youth ministry. Right? What's the language? What do we say yes to?
Bring them up to the church.
Yeah, we're going to promise to, in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, Will you promise to provide and give Christian nurture to, right? And then in our congregation, we stand up. Some churches, they raise their hand. Some churches we say we do. But the idea is youth ministry is the work of the church, not the work of particular individuals gifted to do youth ministry. It is the work of the whole congregation, and which we give evidence to every time we have a baptism. So I want you to walk out empowered to do the ministry you've already promised to do, right? With your kids. Now, just a quick story. I grew up in a little Presbyterian church in Waco, Texas. Now, I don't know if you know Waco, Texas. What do you know about Waco? Baylor University. Sickham Bears. Yeah. Baylor is the largest Baptist university in the world, and it was much more Baptist when I was there. And actually, when I was growing up in Waco, there were more Baptists than people. That was a population reality. I mean, if you did the studies, you would know. You total up the Baptist membership and the population of the whole city and the membership. Yeah. I grew up in a small Presbyterian church, and they would hire for our youth program a part-time Baptist to run the youth ministry.
A part-time Baptist.
Well, I mean, they were full-time. They worked in the church part-time to run our little Presbyterian youth group. And we tried to run them off as quickly as possible. And actually, in my 6 years there, 7th through 12th grade, we prided ourselves on the fact that no part-time Baptist stayed more than 6 months. We ran every one of them off. We were pretty excited about that. And so they could never really get any momentum in a program. Could never get much of a program going. And what happened, by God's grace, is that we fell into this sort of marvelous alchemy of community because we couldn't program our way out of it. And so there are all these people, just boring people. Not like cool Baptists, but they were boring, just boring people like Doris Jones. She was 64 years old when she was born. And Doris, I remember when I was confirmed, Doris came up and gave me a $5 gold piece. Now I didn't remember, I just remember she looked like a Muppet. And she gave me a little $5 gold piece. We never had many conversations, but she must have thought something was going on there. It was pretty important. I remember Edna Lou Sullivan, she hired us to work in her yard. And then there was, I can't even remember her name, but she was a wonderful singer, and she worked with our youth group for a little while. Then there was a couple who had a station wagon that let us tie a rope to the back of the station wagon. They drove us along with our bicycles until we, fell into there were policies against that. There were many policies that were drafted because of our And then there was George Holland, who was my pastor. And George's favorite expression was, It was, wore brown a lot. He's not the kind of guy you'd have thought, this guy could be the next David Letterman. George. But I gotta tell you, when I think about my call to ministry, George Holland, that very real, very normal guy, is right at the center of that message. And so I just want us to begin our conversation with the acknowledgement that the only people God really uses, St. John the Cross says, it's the frail instrumentality of each other. That's what we want. Rather than, man, I hope we can create a really cool program. Kids have enough cool programs in their lives. You know what they don't have in their lives? Adults. And if you can be, as you said, if we can figure out how to communicate, how to build that bridge, we got an incredible opportunity. So hopefully you're going to feel that by the time we're done. So I'm going to walk you through just a little bit of statistics. The Search Institute, which is this research institute in Minnesota, they study a lot about adolescence and faith development. And They asked churches, professionals in churches, are you having trouble hanging on to your 5th and 6th graders? So like this would be 11, 12-year-olds, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. You have trouble hanging on to 5th and 6th graders? Then they asked, do you have trouble hanging on to your 10th through 12th graders? They said, do you have a lot of trouble? That's this column. Do you have some trouble? That's this column. And then you add those two together. What percentage of churches say they have some or a lot of trouble hanging on? You understand how that's set up? Guess what percentage of churches, this is back maybe 10, 15 years ago, said we got so much trouble hanging on to our 10, 11, 12-year-olds. What percentage would you guess? You say 5%?
No.
Oh, you'd say high.
I like 90.
Well, back in the day, when this was taken 15 or so years ago, only 8% of churches said we're really struggling to hold on to our older children. Guess what percentage of churches said we have some or a lot of trouble hanging on to our 10th through 12th graders?
Oh.
Yeah, 93%. Over 9 out of 10 churches said when it comes to our 10th through 12th graders who've got cars and they got jobs and they got girlfriends and they got sports and they got, those are the ones that start really. 9 out of 10 say they're 11, 12 graders. One of the things we've discovered about our older kids is that if they're not leading, they're leaving. Welcome to the party.
Thank you.
How are you?
I found you.
We're so glad you're here. The whole group has been praying and fasting since lunch.
Well, it took that long.
We're glad you're here. So, just want you to get that picture. Now, it's probably, I think you're right, I think it's a little bit harder to hang on to our older children as they move to 5th, 6th grade. But nothing compared to what it's like to hold on to our 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. One of the things we've discovered is that if kids are if they're not leading, they're leaving. And part of the beautiful thing about being in a smaller church, as I was and many of you are, is that kids feel like they're needed. We're not going to have a nursery if you can't help us this week. It is possible. I just remember that I was missed every Sunday in my church if I wasn't there. Not because I'd be missed in my Sunday school class, but because I was supposed to usher, I was supposed to sing in the choir, I was supposed to do something. If we want to engage our older youth, I want to suggest that we've got to be thinking, how can we invite them into leadership? Now, I don't know if it's true here, but in many Presbyterian churches, here's the way you get to be a leader. You put in your time, you show up for about 20 years, and then we might let you be a deacon. You know, I got to tell you, most young people are not saying, gee, my goal in life is to be a deacon in the Presbyterian church. Like it's a big cherry on top. If we want them to lead, we got to invite them into leadership. And I've seen churches that say, you know, let's just put a youth on every one of our committees and let them be ignored. You ever seen that? Where we put a youth on the committee and then everybody talks over them as if they're not there. If there's not somebody to mentor them into leadership, they'll never lead. But one of the opportunities I think we've got with our young people is just to invite them into some sort, find out what they're excited about. Let's invite them into leadership. They can probably create a website for you faster than it takes for the pastor to write the sermon for the week. Yeah?
You talking about high school?
I'm talking about, well, I'm in junior high too, but certainly that older grade, if we want our older kids involved, we got to give them some sort of leadership responsibility. Well, there's a whole lot we can talk about there. I'm gonna move on to this next one. George Barna had a book called The Index of Leading Spiritual Indicators. This was a survey of thousands of people in churches asking them lots of questions. If you're having trouble sleeping, you can get this. Put it by your bedside, it'll help you out. But one of the questions was, what do churches do best and what do churches do worst? Any ideas what he says, what they discovered in the survey? People think churches do best?
People think that they do best?
Yeah, exactly. What do people in churches think that our church does best?
Music.
That would be great.
What was that?
Not music. Yeah, that's exactly it. Churches think we are friendly. And what that means is we are friendly to the people we know, You ever experienced that? So, because how do we usually describe ourselves as a church? We're like a family. In a family, there are people that are in the bloodline, and then there are the outliers, right? We're gonna, you get some yahoo coming to your Christmas, and you're going, who is this person? They don't belong, because we're family. We have our family thing, and right? But we think we're friendly because we're friendly to people that we already know and like. Guess what churches do worst according to this survey?
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
We don't.
Oh, we're not so good at being friendly, even though we think we're friendly. But there's something that they identified, these people in the survey identified, this is what we think we do worst.
Evangelism.
Evangelism, yes, we are lousy at that, but that's not the worst.
I think like controversy.
Deal with controversy? Oh, yeah, we're really lousy at that, but that was not the worst.
Keeping our young people.
Create programs for teenagers. Dead last on the list. The thing, across the board, across denominations, across the country, the thing we do worst is creating programs that actually engage teenagers. And then there's this sticky faith research out of California where they follow kids who are actually involved in their churches and their youth ministries when they were in 12th grade, and then follows them for the next 4 years. Now that's a small sample, right? These are the kids that are still involved in 12th grade.
Well, in California, it's probably not over 10.
So they follow these kids. Well, it's all over the country, but they're doing the research in California. They follow them for 4 years, and what they find out is at the end of that 4 years, out of the sample of kids who were active as 12th graders, less than 25% are still actively practicing their faith. So what we want to get is, yeah, there's some challenges when it comes to young people. But I want to suggest that the crisis is not that we just can't get kids to come to meetings. The crisis is, anybody want to take a stab at what I'm getting at here? Anyone? Bueller? Sue, you got an answer to this? How you doing back there?
I'm trying.
We're not leading young people to mature Christian adulthood. Okay, MCA, mature Christian adulthood. Well, the whole purpose of this process is not so they have these wonderful experiences as adolescents, so they can say, "Wow, I was such a great Christian when I was a teenager." But the idea is that they would live out their faith for a lifetime. And part of what we're discovering is that there's sort of this inflation of kids that are involved, and there's not much sustaining of their faith beyond that. So I want to just point to what the root of that crisis is. And I'm going to suggest the root of the crisis is isolation. The kids are isolated from the very source that will help them grow into mature adulthood. And of course, mature Christian adulthood as well, but even mature adulthood. Anybody here speak a language other than English? Anybody fluent in a language other than English? Or Tennessee? There's a different language yet. Just imagine that Shane is fluent in what language you like to be fluent in?
I can kind of speak Spanish.
Okay, let's just say that Shane is fluent in Spanish. How many of you think Shane would get fluent in Spanish by buying a book called Spanish for Dummies? No. Okay, how many think he'd get fluent in Spanish by listening to cassette tapes, which is what most of us listen to, right? Now there'd be CDs in the car that would say, "Hola," and he'd talk back. Maybe, yeah, you might, one of you thinks that?
Yeah.
How many of you think that Shane's going to learn Spanish if we get him a DVD? He can put it in his computer. There's a good-looking Spanish-speaking woman. Hola, Shane. and Shane talks back to the computer. No? You got another vote back here. Okay, anybody got another theory of how he's going to get fluent in Spanish?
Stick him with a bunch of folks who only speak Spanish.
You got to stick him with a bunch of folks that only speak Spanish. If we want our kids to learn the language of Christian adulthood, finish my sentence.
Oh, you got to put them with adults.
You got to put them with Christian adults. And the problem is Most kids are growing up in a ghetto of people that know exactly what they know. Now suppose you learned calculus from somebody who knew as much calculus as you know.
That would not be much calculus.
Not going to learn a lot of calculus. Yeah. And so what we've got is a culture that has, according to one sociologist, systematically abandoned our young and isolated them from the world of adults. Let me give you a couple quotes to think about. In the University of Colorado Library, I love this line. The generation that knows only itself is destined to remain adolescent forever. It's hard to grow up if we don't connect. I talk about the difference between a horizontal culture and a vertical culture. In a horizontal culture, it's like a stick on the ground in a hurricane. It just blows away. Kids are attracted, all of us are attracted to a horizontal culture. I tend to want to hang out with people in their 50s that have grandkids. That's who I am. That's what I do. We all like to hang out with people like us, and kids are just like that. The church is one of the only institutions left where we can verticalize their culture and they can know people older and people younger. And often, the more affluent the church, the more they stick the kids on the back 40 and they never have to see the adults. The advantage, my son, who has just finished seminary, my son says, I think normal youth ministry, listen to this, I think normal youth ministry is, in a church where you got programs and all that, is remedial. It's like, it's what you do for people that can't take the real class. Real youth ministry is what happens in smaller churches organically, where kids are naturally verticalized. So anybody in here get in trouble as a kid, as a junior high kid? Anybody? Maybe a couple of you. I know you did. You think about that junior high boy who's acting up in youth group or whatever, and if you try to come up with some kind of discipline program, it never really quite works. We're not going to let you come. We're taking your ice cream away. Or you got to sit out in the hall. But if you take that kid and put him with the kindergarten Sunday school class with 3 adults in there, this hyperactive junior high boy and a bunch of kids, all of a sudden, that junior high boy starts acting older. They verticalize because there's room to sort of grow up. And sadly, what we've done is tried to say the only youth ministry that really counts is when we take all of those kids and put them in a room together. If you put 4 junior high boys together, their maturity is the square root of the youngest one's age. Right? Put them around adults and all of a sudden they'll start acting different. The beauty of not having enough kids to have a group is that they have to hang around people like y'all. And so, here's another great quote from C.S. Lewis. We just do the last couple sentences. We laugh and honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the gelding be fruitful. We expect all of this great maturity and decision-making from kids, but we've taken away the very sources that are going to lead them to maturity, which is hanging out with adults. And I'm trying to set churches free to do the ministry they were organically made to do without having to create a magical program. Now, I run a program. I'm a youth pastor. I run a youth group. And I think it's a valuable thing, but it's remedial. I have to do it because I got too many kids in this church. We got to get it organized. But if you've got 3 or 4 kids, or less, we're going to talk about some things you can do. So here's our kind of short-sighted response to the crisis. So, quick review. What's the crisis we're not leading kids to?
The church.
Great. And what's the root of the crisis?
Isolation.
Awesome. Okay, so I've got 4 responses that I think are not great ideas. Here's the first one. The first one is we say, let's hire a youth pastor. If we just hire a youth pastor, that will solve this thing. And so the implication is we're going to try to find a superstar and they will run a great program. When a lot of churches are thinking about who is really fabulous with kids, they're thinking about somebody like this. Let's see if we can make this work. So this right here, in the little circle, is the program of the youth and children's ministry, and here's the church. And they are totally separate entities. And in fact, it's not unusual for kids growing up in a very active youth ministry to say, oh, I don't go to that church. They say, I go to Ignite, or I go to Explode, or whatever the name of the group is, but not connecting to the church. And often the more loyal they are to the life of the youth group, the more difficulty they have plugging into the larger picture. Again, a short-sighted response. Let's just get a youth group. Here's the next one. It's the church's job. And the programmatic implication here is, well, we just complain about the church. You know, if this church really were doing what it's supposed to do, kids would be taken care of, but the church is letting us down. And we complain. And then the last one is, it's the parents' job. I've heard youth pastors say, listen, if parents were doing what parents were supposed to do, bringing their kids, discipling them at home, fulfilling their baptismal vows, then we would be out of a job. But they're not doing their job. And so we complain about the parents. There actually is a whole movie series that suggests that youth ministry is the weed in the church that needs to be pulled. And it says that really the job of youth ministry belongs only to the parents, and the rest of the church should stay out of it. Right? Not a terribly helpful model, but here's a quote that I like to summarize that. There's a solution for every problem that is simple, neat, and wrong. Right? So I want to show you another little video clip, and I'm going to let you turn to a partner or 2 or 3 people, and you're going to talk about the implications for ministry that you might see in this clip.
Anybody have that? Telephone? No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, will somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, so now let's do it.
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
You said you fix it. All right, let's move like it. You said you fix it.
Okay, with a partner or two, just turn to each other. You got 30 seconds. Any implications for the church or ministry that you see in that clip? Go.
What do y'all think? I don't know. I think we just sometimes don't do the most obvious things.
Everybody's claiming
Like walk up the steps.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, talk to someone.
The thing I think is like they sat there and waited for somebody else to come along and rescue them. Who had like the right tools to fix the problem.
Okay, what did you see in this clip that reminds you of the church?
inertia.
There's total inertia. Yeah, hard to move. Good. What else?
Let's count on the machine to get it done.
Count on the machine to get it done. I'm just so surprised. Yeah. What else?
They waited for the guy who had the right tools to fix it.
Wait for the expert to come and solve it. Yeah. Good. What else?
But if he gets stalled, everything stalls.
That's right. When the expert comes, you finally get out of the interim, and you finally get a path through. He gets stuck just quick. Good. What else? Things like, young families, they just don't come to our church. There's that big church downtown. They have a gym. Yeah. Everybody wants to go to that church. We just have organ music. It's just organ. Yeah. Teenagers won't come if there's an organ within 50 feet of them. So.
Let's get a snare drum.
If we just get us a snare drum, that'll pretty well solve it, won't it? Yeah.
And one guitar.
And one guitar. Yeah. It's so easy for us to be paralyzed. Now, we watch this from the outside, and we say, are you kidding? Just
walk up the steps.
Walk! Just take a step. People look at the church from the outside, and they say, you want kids? There are several hundred around you whose parents would love for you to tutor them. There are kids around you whose parents would love for you to have a soccer game with them once a week. But we're thinking, we got to try to get kids to our meeting. And for some reason, they don't want to come to them. But people on the outside are saying, church, just take a step. What would happen if your church said, okay, we're going to take a month to think about and pray about and consider what sort of community we could adopt. How about we adopt the 3rd grade class at the school near us? We're just going to pray for that teacher and for those kids. And if they need drivers for a field trip, we'll try to help them out. Or they need cookies for them, we'll help them. Just what's one little place we could say to the community, we're going to bless you. And when we are totally focused on, see, we've been totally focused on how do we get people to come to our meetings. Now, remember how much Jesus focused on that? He was like, would y'all go? There are too many of you. I'm going out to the lake. No, too many. But we're focused on getting folks to come to meetings, and the watching world is saying, well, that's pretty irrelevant to me. Well, what happened? We just took a step and did something. Okay? So I want to walk you through sort of this process of leading young people through this process of moving to mature Christian adulthood. So we've kind of watched the research over the years, and this is just my kind of graphic of how that happens. Just imagine that this is the flow of a river. And once we get them in this flow, they tend to move toward mature Christian adulthood. Let me just ask you first of all, how many of you came from a home where there was at least one Christian parent? Okay, pretty close. Looking like Pentecostals in here. Any idea what this section here is in the middle? Yeah, those are kind of the teenage years. Oh. All right. Then, any idea what that ball is up on top?
The separate program.
There you go. It's youth ministry. So that's now. What do you notice about where the youth ministry is placed? It's not in the flow. Now, it's okay that it's out there because that's where the kids are. But the problem is, a lot of times we see that as an end in itself. If we can just get kids to come to our meetings, then we have succeeded. As opposed to those meetings are just a means to the end. And so, as my son would say, this process here is what often happens in small churches organically. It's what happened to me with George and Trish and Edna Lou and all of those folks in my, Frank and Dorothy, all those people in my church growing up. This is the remedial. It's kind of outside the flow, but it's an okay way to do it as long as we drop them back into this flow. So just point to this first, the research is very clear. There's a study, this is the last 50 years, this is consistent research. The most powerful source for building faith maturity in adolescence is who? Their mom and dad. There's just no question about it. All the measures of, there's a study called the National Study of Youth and Religion, the largest study of adolescent spirituality ever done. And it was very clear that the quality of faith that you see in young people is not totally, but primarily, strongly predicted by what's going on with their mom and dad. Not how often they came to church, not how often they went to youth group, not did they go to vacation Bible school or go on mission trips, but it's what was going on in the home. And if we had time, you all could tell that story for yourself, right? For better or for worse. Our parents had, do you remember that moment when you looked in the mirror or some words came out of your mouth and you looked strangely like your parents? You remember that and how terrifying it was? Parents have that influence on their kids, right? But I want to suggest we got to move beyond just the nuclear family, because the biggest predictor of faith maturity for adults is not just the nuclear family. The nuclear family is important, but there's something else. And a couple other reasons why we want to move beyond nuclear. It may not be biblical. When people talk about family values in America, they're talking about 1950s values. They're not talking about biblical. They say, oh, we're talking about the biblical family. You want to have a biblical family? Move your mother-in-law in with you. I don't want that kind of biblical family. But remember when Jesus is 12, he goes to the temple? Remember the story? He goes to the temple and it's time to come home. Joseph and Mary make a full day's trip. They're setting up camp. Remember? They're setting up camp. Mary says, Joseph, have you seen the Lamb of God who taketh away the sins of the world? And Joseph is saying, no, I've not seen the Alpha and the Omega. I've been looking, but I can't see him. And so they start looking. And they ask all kinds of people. They can't find him. Now, y'all, if you took your kids on a little vacation, and you just happen to not see them for 12 hours on the trip, you'd be in jail. Right? Were Mary and Joseph, were they bad parents? How do you explain that?
It takes a village.
It takes a village. He was with Uncle Benedad, cousin Miriam got him, somebody's got him. In fact, they did not even think about finding him to get him into the caravan. Somebody's got him. So, the church is one of the only places where that can still be true. And most kids are growing up orphans. They have a mom and dad. And mom and dads feel all this tremendous weight of, if my kid has a problem, it's totally my responsibility. It's my fault. Of course, they also feel like if my kid gets a touchdown, it's my, it's because I'm awesome, right? But I think all of the focus on sort of family values, though positive at some level, has also served to heap incredible guilt on moms and dads, and they feel so overwhelmed. And I gotta believe God never intended it to be that way. That we were made to, instead of being this way, the mom and dad is a part, they're here running the show with their kids, but there's a whole community, a whole constellation of other adults in our kids' lives. I call it stacking the stands, which is the title of this talk, actually. That parents, one of the best things they can do rather than learning how to, get their kids to behave today, is to surround their kids with great adults. The kids will eventually behave if they hang around great people. If they hang around idiots, they're going to go be idiots. Yeah?
Like television.
It's like hang out right like the idiot box. Yeah, exactly. A lot of times parents today feel really helpless. And a lot of times in the church, we feed that. We just put more weight on them. Parents, if you're really doing your job, your kid wouldn't be so messed up. As opposed to saying, we want to come alongside you. And we want to bless you. And if you're in this church, you're no longer alone. Thank you. And then a lot of times parents of the youth we serve they may not be mature Christian adults themselves. And so to put all this weight, and a lot of what passes for family ministry is really about making parents feel guilty. And I want to suggest that's not terribly helpful. even if they're wrong, right? And well, let me tell you, there was a season, I have 3 kids, Adam doesn't leave, Adam's my oldest. And when he left, I had these 3 women in my house, and I would just wake up in the morning and say, I'm sorry. I knew I had done something for all of them, every day. So I want to show you this little clip. Now this is fascinating, and because Shane told me that this was a group that did not use colorful language, I have cut all of the inappropriate language out of this video. Okay, but I want to set this up. Well, he didn't say it was 100% true. But here's the situation. There were these teenagers. We know there's a boy named Michael who's 15 years old, and you'll see in this clip. He's sitting at the bar. It's breakfast time, and he and I'm going to guess a sibling know that they can get their mother to freak out. All right, and they catch it on video and load it up on YouTube. And now millions of people have seen this video clip of this mother screaming. And the way they know they can get their mother to freak out is by Michael saying, "I'm an atheist." Okay? And so there are a couple times where she uses language that's not in the Bible. But I just imagine where that might be inserted. Let's take a look at that. I'll let you process it.
You're an atheist. Great, Michael. All right, you know what? We need to start going to church every week. I have it.
I don't believe in that.
You got yourself confirmed, and you said 2 bishops.
Yeah, a lot can happen. You can think.
Well, I'm saying all of a sudden you just quit believing in God. Yeah. And all of a sudden there is no God.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you. You want to know there's no God? Then you're going to get absolutely nothing for Christmas, because that's what Christmas is about. Jesus Christ.
Okay.
up for you about that clip?
Where's the love?
Where's the love? Okay.
Church is going to fix him.
Yeah, we're going to start going to church every week because that preacher is going to say something that'll fix it. Yeah? Good, what else?
Strictly a knee-jerk reaction. She didn't think about it at all.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Still saying God is in a different locale, but like God wasn't present in that moment. God's over there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Seeing God as somehow at church or at some other location. Good.
Her weapon was to withhold material things.
Yeah.
That's her weapon of response.
Yeah. I can figure that's going to work.
She got that somewhere though.
What's that?
She didn't just come out like on her own and decide that like this is going to be the way I'm going to counteract that. Somebody taught her to react that way.
Yeah, where do you figure she picked that up?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, she learned that sort of reactivity. Okay, let me push you a little further. This Sunday, Michael and her mother walk in your church. What do they look like? What's Michael look like?
He's in a hoodie and he doesn't ever glance up.
He's never looking up?
Yeah.
What's that?
under protest.
He's under protest, that's right. Yeah? What does Mom look like?
She's probably looking at him the whole time.
Looking at him, she's tense, she got that anxiety, right?
She might be looking for help.
Yeah, well, yeah, certainly, she might, she's most certainly looking for help, not quite knowing how to do it. What would she find in your church? She walks in the sanctuary.
Hopefully she finds a greeting.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Somebody welcome her? Yeah.
And you hope they don't say, where have you been? You know, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm so glad to see you today.
We missed you for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So would it make sense to say somebody genuinely welcome?
Yeah, there was a genuine welcome.
Or a Christian?
Yeah. There was But there was a sense of the welcome, the hospitality of the Spirit, and in whatever way that is, that they feel. Now, let's just say the church does exactly what it ought to do. They sit on a pew, and it's next to, the most loving Tennessee grandmother in the world. She brings them cookies and, loves them, hugs them. Oh, Michael, you're so cute. Okay, well, so suppose you have just the right response. What can you expect from Michael?
He's still upset.
Disconnect.
Yeah, he's still going to be disconnected.
Yeah.
What do you expect from the mother?
Suspicion.
Desperation.
Suspicion, desperation, but still this high anxiety. Now, a lot of times we think we can fix this with a single thing. But you know what does work? Very few people can withstand the relentless power of unconditional love. And you just hang in there. Dumb persistence usually works. It's not about, oh, we got to get just the right technique, because we think, well, I said hello to her. We greeted her at the door. We got her to fill out a first-timer card. We left the bread on her doorknob. Is that not enough? Yeah. How many times do you think it's going to take of interaction with Michael and the mom before things start to calm down and Michael feels warmed up? At least 3?
Could be a lot longer than that.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be 7, 10, 15. But for the church to be prepared for the Michael and family to come in, that feels like youth ministry. You put Michael in a Sunday school class where we're discussing Habakkuk and all of the things that prophet. Chances are Michael's not going to get all that engaged. But one little woman at a time. Let me just get a little personal. So I'm at Central Presbyterian Church. It's Youth Sunday. Y'all have Youth Sunday at your church? So this is where the youth preach. So there are like 8 of us in the youth group. And so I don't remember what we did, but I do remember our attitude in planning the service was offend at all costs. We're going to try to wake this church up because they're so boring and so stiff. They're just so Presbyterian. We're gonna wake them up. So I don't remember what we did. I remember we talked about clowns and confetti, and there was a lot of possibilities there. But I remember by the time the service was over, we had succeeded. And so at the end of the service, if there's any, Edna Lou, this is before she hired us to mow her lawn, Edna Lou was the one person we wanted to offend the most. Now Edna Lou sucked on lemons before she came to church. You know that woman? I mean, she'd cut up lemon. She'd be so puckered up by the time she got to church. And she'd look with disdain down on the youth, you know. So we were going after Edna Lou. We wanted her to be unhappy by the time the service was over. So we finished the service, and I'm standing at the door with 3 of my buddies, and we're in enjoyed it line. Y'all have enjoyed it lines at your church? Yeah, people come by the pastor and say enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what that means.
So I'm standing at the enjoyed it line, and here comes, everybody's generally very sweet. They're squeezing our cheeks and hugging us. We're so proud of you and all that stuff you expect. Everybody except Edna Lou. Edna Lou she is just, you can just feel the steam coming off of her. And she is in the sanctuary. We're at the door. She's in the sanctuary. And she waits for everybody to leave. And then she comes up to us. And I turn around to my buddies and I say, hey, check it out. There's Edna Lou. Got high-five each other. Because, when you're 15 and you got a bunch of other 15-year-old boys with you, you can feel pretty cocky. Right? So Edna Lou walks up to me. And so I was the preacher for youth Sunday. So I'm the one she's coming after. And she says, young man, I need to talk to you. And so I look to my right where my buddies are. And I look for my homies. And they had, yeah, it was just me and Edna Lou. Which was a frightening, possibility in itself. And so Edna Lou grabs me by the arm. She takes me into the sanctuary, the center aisle of the sanctuary. Takes me in, grabs me by the arm with her lobster claws, and she starts pointing her finger in my face. And she says, young man, I heard everything you said. I know what you were trying to do. Don't think for a second. I didn't understand what you were saying. I have one thing to say to you, and I want you to never forget this. Listen to me now. Look at me. You're going to be a preacher one day. Now, I would never want Edna Lou to be like my Sunday school teacher, small group leader. But as a 15-year-old kid, the first time the thought of a call to ministry ever came to me was out of a 117-year-old living Sunday home. I just want to suggest that that in a smaller church there are opportunities abound to not get it right and still have it work. One of my favorite lines in parenting and in life and in ministry is it doesn't have to work for it to work. Your kid doesn't have to make his bed or her bed every day in order for that kid not to be an axe murderer. Right? It doesn't have to be perfect for it actually to work. So here's the rest of this diagram. So what we've discovered in the data is that the biggest predictor of faith maturity for adults is an extended Christian family, a constellation of adults, a constellation of a worldview that changes what feels normal to that kid. So let me just ask, how many of you had at least one person in your life as you grew in your faith that had as much or more influence on your faith than your mom and dad did? Yeah, that happened. Not everybody, but 60% or so. Yeah. So there's, when I talk to parents, I try to spend very little time on technique, on here's how you should parent. I try to spend more time on how can you surround your kids with the right kind of people. That's where the high leverage is, particularly when they get to be teenagers. So, of course, the text we look at here, Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. These things need to be on your heart. And then remember what it says? What is that?
Write them on the doorways of your house.
Yeah, right before that. That's one of the ways to do it. What are we supposed to do? It's got a generational address.
Parents.
Yeah, teach these things to your children. Impress them on your children. Talk about it 4 times a day. What are they? Talk about it. When you rise up.
When you eat.
When you lie down. When you sit. And when you're on the way. Think about those 4 times for families. First thing in the morning, last thing at night, and at meals, and then traveling somewhere. I like to suggest to parents that hearts are cracked open at those times of day in a really unique way. The first thing to be spoken, the last thing to be spoken, whatever we say at the meal, and then while we're traveling somewhere. Those of us that have done youth ministry, we know that kids' lives often are changed when we take them away. Right? Take them on a trip. They lie down, they rise up, they eat together, and they travel. All of those things are in place there. And then it says, write them on the doorpost of your house. So it's in the mezuzah, there's a little scroll, and it's got these words in it. Orthodox Jews, kiss it on the way in. Tie it around your finger. Why would you tie a string around your finger?
It's annoying.
Don't forget.
Yeah.
Put it as a frontlet on your hat, a frontlet around your head, so every time you walk, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. Every step. Because we have a tendency to forget. Right? And then Hebrews 12, 1 and 2 is that great cloud of witnesses. Because we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses. Let's run with endurance the race set before. Okay, so I want to talk about this whole notion of stacking the stands. Let me define it for you. Stacking the stands is about building cross-generational connections between our children and youth and the extended Christian family of adults in the church. Sometimes with parents, I'll have them actually draw an arena and have them write the names of people who are in their kids' lives. Who are the adults your kids have in their lives? And the parents can actually populate that list. Kids can populate that list. One of the things I was so proud about, two of my 3 are married, and when they got married, they chased around all kind of couples and said, hey, can we hang out with you, and will you give us one little marriage mentoring dinner? Can we ask you questions about how to be married? So the church can provide it, parents can provide it, and kids can go after it themselves. So when most churches are thinking about youth ministry, we're thinking about, let's hire somebody as our expert to be the relational savant, like a camp counselor that will just pour into individual kids. That's okay, but it's a little bit fragile. How come?
They don't stay forever.
They may not stay forever. This person may leave, they may move, they may die. It's also fragile because it's just a single line. I want you to consider this one. How about we put the kid in the middle? And we surround that kid with a constellation of relationships. What would happen if the church saw itself for every teenager, every child in the church, we were building this web of friendships. So that every one of those, when I walked into the church, when I was young, I knew that I would be greeted by 10 different adults who would all know my name. Now, I didn't know all their names, but they knew my name. So I want to tell you about Lee, our baby daughter. Now Lee is, she was our child that was most resistant to spiritual things in our family. If you're a preacher and you've had children, you probably had one of those. And so she wanted to be very clear that she wasn't excited about all this God stuff and about having a dad who was a preacher. So when she was 10, she developed this horrible allergy. Y'all have allergies out here? Yeah. So she developed a horrible allergy. She became allergic to her father. And I would go in for the hug, you know, and I'd squeeze her, you know, say, hey, baby, good morning. And she'd be like, oh, don't stop touching me. Nuclear waste, right? So during this time, in God's economy, I was working on a book called Family-Based Youth Ministry. So here's this guy who's supposed to be, you know, some kind of expert about families, and his daughter won't talk to him. His daughter hates the church. And I'm feeling a little bit like a hypocrite. You know? And so I figured, you know what this kid needs? This kid needs more family devotions. I figured that straight around. Don't y'all think? So I pulled the family together. I said, okay, y'all, we're gonna have family time. So I started, you know, pulled out the Bible. I figured, you know, I'm a youth pastor. I'm gonna have some fun ideas. There'll probably be some marshmallows involved. And, you know, there's relays. Who knows? I mean, it's gonna be fun. So I'm doing this thing, and I look across the table, and I just get. And that was my wife. I look over here at Adam. He's, you know, the complete ADD child. He's like picking his toes. He's off in some la la land. And then Debbie, the good one. Debbie's, I got a verse. Can I share my verse? I got a verse to share. And there's Lee. There's Lee, who's like, you can hear the sound of air escaping from a tire. Oh, I love Bible time. This is great. So we go through this for about a week. Every night I'm trying to have, you know, something really meaningful and deep, you know, that the family can engage in, a question that will help us connect at a heart level. And by the time the week is over, it's just horrific. And I say to Susan, I say, baby, I think maybe we ought to just push the pause button on this. So we're not proud of this, but we quit having family emotions at that point. And well, fast forward 3 years. I'm walking, it's a Saturday morning, I'm walking past Lee's room. I look in, and she's lying on her bed. Her feet are toward me. She's lying this way. And I look, she's like in 9th grade, and she's reading her Bible. And I run downstairs. I say, she's reading her Bible. And my wife, who is one of the most hilarious humans in the world, Susan says, well, she didn't learn that from you, did she? And, you know, she's exactly right. We couldn't do it. For whatever reason, it wasn't going through. But Lee, as Lee was growing up, she had Todd, her pastor, and Erica, her youth leader, and Piper, her prayer partner, and Nancy Hart, who was just a random woman in the class, and Taylor, who was her Sunday school teacher, and Mary Pillow, who was her Bible study leader, and Evelyn, that crazy lady who kept going to Uganda all the time and working there. And you notice these lines, where do they go? Yeah, they don't just go to the kid, they go to each other. It's what Jim Fowler called long lines of convergent faithfulness. She was sort of webbed in, and this one here, Erica, she was the one sort of closest to Lee, and as one of her youth leaders, Erica read the Bible, and Lee couldn't imagine not being like Erica. As a parent, I gotta tell you, if there's a train coming down the tracks and it's the choice between me and Erica to get run over by that train, I'm pushing her out of the way every time. when you're a parent and the church steps into a place of real raw failure for you, you'll spend the rest of your life paying the church back. And that's exactly where I am today. I will never be able to repay my church for what they did for my kids. It's not possible. And as I work there and serve there and eventually will volunteer there, I want to do that not because I feel obligated, but because I have this debt of gratitude that I can never pay back. So when we think about, just think about your context. Who are the people that could step alongside the screaming mother and step into that place of failure? And even the families that look like they have it together, basically, I've done the studies, and basically 1 out of 1 families has problems. Right? They can look pretty nice and polished up, but they're all kind of messed up at home in some way. They need grace and they need the church. Well, I want to just play with this whole notion of expomization. That term ring a bell for you? Yeah, I made it up. It's a word that I want to believe means creating an extended family. So if you're going to expomize your church, you're going to create an extended family around the children and youth in your church. I think what I'd like to do, it is, y'all have done so good. It's the middle of the afternoon, and you're, most of you are still awake. I'm really grateful for you. But we're going to take a little bit of a break just to let you breathe. And but before we do that, I want to show you a little clip to sort of set the stage for our conversation. What I want to do is, by the time we're done today, I want you to leave knowing that you can do this in your church. And I want you to have absolute confidence that you can do it without getting a hernia. This is another stairway experience where it would be easy to feel stuck, but this is a different, these folks came at it a little different way, and I think it's kind of fun. So we'll take just like a 5-minute break. Before we break, I'll tell you a little bit about this little table we got, and then we'll come back and kind of land it in. So here's the clip, and we'll talk about it when we come back, if you can remember that one. for kids to connect beyond the generations, and in fact, where they have an appetite for that. So let me just tell you a couple little things we got on the table here, and I'll give you a break. So the first one is Foundation Youth Ministry, which was written by a hypocrite. But it essentially is this whole picture of what we're talking about today. How do we build a ministry that's not dependent on a program? And sustainable youth ministry is how to build a ministry that's not dependent on a person. But just making sure you got all of your systems in place that it's going to last beyond any particular pastor or youth leader. I know some of you are in smaller churches. One of our consultants with Youth Ministry Architects is Stephanie Caro, and she wrote this book called Thriving Youth Ministry in Smaller Churches, and so it's pretty helpful stuff. And I know some of you probably do premarital counseling things, and so if you do this, there's a little book on the first year of marriage that Susan and I wrote with some friends of ours. Why that's the most important year of a woman's life, most important year of a man's life, But if you have people that you do premarital counseling with that don't like to read the same book, then you can do 2 separate books. Yeah, it's about boundaries. You can if there's something there that's valuable to you, and either you can't afford it or you don't have any cash with you now, you can just grab my card and send me a check, or take it, and I'll have another difference. So let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back, and we'll have about 40 minutes break. Any sort of comments, observations you want to say before, questions you want to bring up before we dive into this next part? Really want to talk about in this part. So how do we implement this? How do we actually do this?
Maybe you're going to talk about this, but I have a really hard time getting volunteers who are over like the age of 40, because they look at me and say, I'm too old to do this. Do you have ideas about how to change that mentality? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. First of all, I have this little game that I play when I give these talks, and I call it the $100 bet deal. So I offer $100 if I'll give you a way of recruiting volunteers, and if it doesn't work, I'll give you $100. Okay. So I've made this bet to about it's about probably 10,000 people by now, and I've never had to pay, but you can be the first. I have 2 things. One is we've just written a little handbook on recruiting volunteers that is a sort of a boot camp. It's like a 30-day, work this process for 30 days. And so first of all, it's not published yet, so I'll be happy to send you a copy of that, and anybody else who wants one. I'll send you a copy of that and see if it works. And also, you can edit it as well. You said this doesn't make any sense to me. That would be helpful too. Okay. If you'll just email me and say send me that book, then I'll just send you the. But basically, when it comes to recruiting volunteers, usually we just give up too fast. Usually it takes 8 no's to get to a yes. So you just have to keep knocking. Would you help with no? Would you help? Would you ask them 8 times? They'll crack eventually. Anything else we want to talk about before we get started? I'm kind of getting the sense that you're getting it. I mean, I see in your faces that it resonates with you. Yeah? Okay. So here's my kind of guarantee. I know you can do this. You're going to look at this and you'll say, well, we can do that. All right? I want you to imagine that you're in a laboratory. A lot of times in the Presbyterian church that is all about the book of order, right? We think we have to have a finished product. It's got to be done. Well, in today's economy, it's not about finished products. The iPod, which came out, 15 years ago, has had who knows how many upgrades that thing's had. It's not done when it comes out, but it's out. And then we figure it out as we go. The Presbyterian Church has a way of waiting for every light to be green before we start the trip. And it's not going to happen. So I just want you to experiment. Now, somebody, I was talking to somebody about Thomas Edison a little bit earlier. You alluded to Thomas Edison, right? What happened to Thomas Edison? A lot. He failed all the time, right? I'm fearful that in our tradition, we are terrified to fail. And as a result, we innovate very little because we want to make sure it's going to work. Well, new things never work. And which is why we keep doing it the way it's always been done, because it's a lot safer to have something that doesn't work that we've always done than to try something new that's got a risk of failure. So as we think about these things, I want you to just think you're in the laboratory, it's going to fail, but eventually we're going to stumble onto something, right? So the first thing is, step one is you're going to try something. Try something that will connect the generations. Try something intergenerational. Maybe it's a class for parents and kids together. Maybe it's a grandparent age people and junior high age people. Maybe it's a prayer partner program where one adult's matched up with one youth or child. You're just going to try something. Now, it could be the elders versus the children in kickball. Okay? It doesn't have to be a great idea. In fact, you know, I'm in Nashville. What's Nashville famous for?
Country music.
Country music. Now, here's the deal. People in Nashville make money hand over fist over stupid ideas. Have y'all listened to country music? You know, I mean, there's some very clever stuff, but it's because somebody's willing to throw out something ridiculous, right? And people, you got to, in our church, we got to expand our filter of things we're willing to try. And so, let's try something. We don't have to feel like it'll for sure work, but it's worth a shot. And here's the great thing. Even if it doesn't work, the process of having 2 kids and 2 adults plan an event together, that works. So all of a sudden they build this friendship, and then they go, and every time they see each other in church, they go, yeah, that was a real bomb, wasn't it? Yeah, it really was a bomb. That's okay. When our youth group used to get together at George's house after we run off our Baptist, we get together, and you know what we talk about? We bonded over how lousy our youth group was. We talked about, they got a great group down at the Methodist Church, but but in our group, like, we had 8 kids in our group. Guess how many came on an average week? 8. We were all there every week, but we complained about how lousy we were, right? Anyway. I'm off, so I'll go later. So there are 2 kind of programs. One is a totally new program that you just come up with. Another is what I call an exfamized program. So you take something you've already got and build an extended family around it. So let's just say you do. We used to have this graduating senior event, a little banquet for our graduating seniors. Presbyterian women put it on, and the graduating seniors would gather in the house next to the church, and it was we'd all sort of stand there, and everybody had nice clothes on. We'd drink punch for about 30 minutes and talk awkwardly, and then we'd sit around the table and talk awkwardly, and it was kind of quiet, and, the kind of thing where you can hear the clinking of the dishes every time somebody moves, and it's just really sort of awkward and uncomfortable. And then the pastor would get up and give a 30-minute history of our church, which was compelling. And then we'd have communion together, and we'd give them a little gift. It was actually a silver communion cup that looked strangely like a jigger. We figured give them something useful before they go off to college.
That's right.
So that was the event. It was okay. It was fine. But then we externalized it. We said, what would happen if we invited the parents to come to this event? Not a crazy thing, but we'll invite the parents to come, and we had to say to the Presbyterian women who sponsored the event, would y'all be willing to do an extra 3 times as many meals? And so we did it the first year, and it was like an entirely different event. There's noise, there's energy, there's laughter, and we had the parents stand over the kids. Each parent stands over that graduating child and speaks a blessing over that child. Even parents that are not were not Christians could speak a blessing over their kids. So some of them prayed their blessing, and some of them just spoke a blessing. So, dear Lord, bless Johnny as he, or Johnny as you go off to and it was a really tender, powerful thing just by, it was the same event, but we built an extended family around it and in it. Does that make sense? So if we had time, and in fact, in the back of Family-Based Youth Ministry, I've got like 150 ideas of things you can do that are ways to bring the generations together. It doesn't have to be a great idea. It's just you're just going to try something. A watermelon seed spitting contest. It can be any ridiculous idea that brings the generations together. I want to suggest you try one or two of those in year number 1, and then I can pretty well guarantee you that it won't work. When it doesn't work, you can say, "Woohoo! We're right on track." Right? Because that's the plan. You're going to try something and it will fail. It's a laboratory. Try it and fail, and you're going to feel like I'm just like you're recruiting volunteers. I called 10 people and they all said no. Whew, I'm right on track. Right? It doesn't have to work for it to work. So here's step number 2. Let's say that together. 1, 2, 3. Now, guess what's going to happen to that one? It's probably going to fail too, and you're going to go, woohoo! We are making it. Look at all the progress we're making. We come up with another thing that didn't work. And then the step number 3 is you're going to repeat anything that works. So if you come up with the ice cream cranking, and every year everybody brings their homemade ice cream to share together, and we have a little contest, and whoever wins gets ice cream for a year. You have some kind of silly little thing. Let's try it. If that works, let's try that next year. Or if it works and it's too much work, well, you don't do it next year. But what I'm suggesting is that somebody's got to be thinking, how can we deliberately bring the generations together? Because it will not happen. It's like oil and water. No, yeah? Oil and vinegar, right?
Oil and water too.
That's the same? Yes. Now what's the dressing?
Oil and
vinegar.
Yeah, you got to shake it up if it's going to work. And typically nobody's shaking it up. And we're satisfied with those parts just separating as they naturally do. Kids will naturally separate to be by themselves, and adults will naturally separate to be by themselves. Just wonder, if you're a pastor, are there a couple people who are willing to champion this? And you just say, will you come up with one thing this year where we can bring the generations together? Let's see what happens. And I call that tending to the dance floor. Most of the time in our leadership training, we are equipping the dancer to dance better. We're trying to help them learn how to teach a better lesson, or recruit more volunteers, or whatever the dancing skill happens to be, as opposed to building the infrastructure so this thing can last. So, things like, can we just let's get a calendar of events. Let's get a database or a directory of people that might be interested in doing this. Let's get little job descriptions together. Whatever it might be, that's kind of dance floor stuff. Now, when we fail to do that, we just focus on, we just want somebody to do something with the youth. Let's just get a volunteer to do something with the youth. It kind of ends up something like this. This is the dancer, Mr. Magic, she's got a great trip sound out, great form.
Oh my goodness.
She's right on course.
She's right on course. In terms of your next steps, what would happen if you got 2 people who could partner together to pray about this in your church and come up with one thing to do in the next year? And also think about not what are we going to do with the people in our congregation, but if you're one of those churches, and most of us are, that says, gee, we need some more kids. Well, then you say, who in this community, how can we bless young people in this community? And what group of young people do we want to target? And you could say, we really want to adopt a a school sports team, or we want to adopt a grade in a school, or a particular school that's nearby, and any ways that you all can find to reach out and serve the community can't help but have some sort of residual effect on the congregation. Remembering this story of a friend of mine who went to it was a Presbyterian church, and he was there to just sort of observe and then do some consulting with the congregation afterwards. So he was on the front row. This was a communion Sunday. And this particular communion Sunday, there was a woman serving who was in her mid-70s, and she was, looked like a Presbyterian elder, a nice silk blouse with flowers on it and a skirt, and she was up serving communion. So he was here on the front row, and she was like here. People were coming by and receiving communion. And as he's watching her, she is speaking, this is the body of Christ for you. And then behind him, back over here, he hears this noise of these 4 or 5 teenagers, and they're a little bit noisy, but it's not quite as noisy as the usher, who's right, hushing the teenagers who are coming up for communion and poking and tickling and giggling and whatever. Well, he turns his eyes back to the woman, and she is starting. She's you can tell she's trying to sort of hold it together. She's biting her lip, and he's thinking maybe she's had a heart attack, or he's not quite sure. So he's trying to decide, should I get up and try to catch her if she falls? So these kids are coming up the aisle, and the first one comes by, and she's got tears running down her eyes, and she said, "Thomas, this is the body of Christ broken for you. Jimmy, this is the body of Christ broken for you." And she's just, by the time she finishes the last bit, she's just, you can see she's just exhausted. So after the service is over, my friend pulls together the pastor and some people who are working with the teenagers in the church. And this woman is there. The group's gathering, and he's sitting next to her, and he says, he introduces himself, and her name's Mildred, and he says, "You obviously have a great connection with these young people. Clearly you really care about them." And she said, "Actually, this is the first time I've ever talked to any of them. 3 years ago, the pastor asked me if I would pray. I'll be part of a group of people that prays for our kids. And he gave us these pictures of them with their prayer needs that they look up and at. I've been praying, we trade them around. I've been praying for 3 years for these children. And this is the first time I've ever been able to see them. It's also the first time I've ever been able to serve communion. And it just overcame me." Well, when I heard that story, I thought I said, that's you, history. It may not be that she will ever lead us through Bible study, but how many people are in our church who'd be willing to pray for 3 children every week? And we pass that little group of cards around with their pictures. How many people in nursing homes and shut-ins do we have that would be delighted to have a kid's picture on their refrigerator to be praying for every week, every day? Again, I just want you to imagine the world of ministry as you could do it in your context. What might you be able to do? As you're about that business of implementing, there are some wrong questions to ask. And I want to tell you the 3 questions you don't need to ask. Right? Here's the first one. Can you give us some great ideas? You don't need any more great ideas. You just need to implement the lousy ideas you have. Don't wait around till you have a great one. Just implement some lousy idea. It'll be fine. Now, you remember all the really creative things that Jesus did with his disciples? Hey guys, let's walk up the mountain. Okay. Yeah, now I'm going to talk for about 3 days. Right now, not like, we don't have to worry about getting all like zippy and creative. Hey, if you want to get zippy and creative, it's fine. But just don't worry about great ideas. We have this thing in Nashville called the Boulevard Bolt. And the Boulevard Bolt is it's a run for homeless people. And it's an Episcopal church, a Jewish synagogue, and a Baptist church. Sounds like a joke. They walk into a bar. And so these 3 churches got together, 2 churches and a synagogue got together, so let's do something for homelessness. Somebody came up with a stupid idea of doing a run on Thanksgiving morning. He said, I know, let's have people pay $50 each to run 5 miles. Isn't this a great idea? Can you imagine what people around that table said? What would they say? If it were your session, what would they say? That's crazy. That'll never happen. It's Thanksgiving morning, families. Now your church will say, go for it. That's the church I'm going to do. But they eventually decided to do that. And now the thing that was really a lousy idea has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for homeless ministry in Nashville. Now, all that's to say, don't worry about having a tight filter on a great idea. Just get moving with some lousy idea. Right? Here's the next one. Do you understand how different we are? See, we're a little bit special. I call this the trap of terminal uniqueness. Every church thinks they're special. Now, in your church, you've got probably 5% pure weirdness. And I'll bless you with that. Like, let's just say you have a rooster instead of a cross on your steeple. That's weird. All right, I'll give you that. But most of the time, the things we think are unique or special are the things everybody else has. Like, you understand. Young families don't come to our church. Oh, really? Oh, we have kids from, there are different schools. Like there's not just one school anymore. You won't believe this about our kids. In our town, kids, they're so busy. I've never seen anything like it. In our town, it's like the devil has taken over. There's soccer games on Sundays. You can't expect us to do ministry on, right? It's just a thing. It's just I'm reading a book about Marcus Aurelius right now, of all things. And one of the things that Marcus Aurelius says, which I love, is the obstacle is the path. The thing that we think is in our way is the thing that will be the fuel to get us to where we want to go. So the fact that we have obstacles, it's just a thing. And so to be obsessed about, you don't understand, we're really different. You can't expect us to actually build relationships between adults and kids because our adults don't like kids. Welcome to the Presbyterian. Oh, no, that's not true. That is not true. Okay, here's the last one. Well, you know how my church understands it's not about numbers? Now, here's the deal. Most people would say, ministry is just not about numbers. And it's like the bobbleheads start to nod as soon as you say that. Everybody, that's right. Well, I want to give you a little parable. A parable, of course, is a story that never happened. I got these 3 children, that part happened. I take them to Disney World, and I say, be back at the flagpole at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock comes, and Debbie's there, Lee's there, Susan's there. No app, ADD, AM. And I say to Susan, hey baby, it's 9 o'clock, don't you think it's time to leave? And she says, well, Adam's not here. I'll say, honey, it's 9 o'clock. We have 2 very quality children. Let's just work with the ones that come. Can we let that hang for just a second? Let's just work with the ones that come. And those of you that are mothers, you know what she would say. We can't leave Adam. And she'd say, honey, we've got 3 children. I'd say, why are you so obsessed with numbers? It's not about numbers. It's about quality. We have quality. And she would say, well, because that third one just happens to be ours. Now, in our tradition, right? Baby comes into the life of our church. We have a sacrament in which we stand and say, dibs on the baby. That was ours. It's not ours if they choose to be good kids and always come back to church. If they don't get pregnant at 12 years old, if they don't get arrested, well, they're ours. And a lot of times what we do is, because we explain away our lack of faithful management of our flock by saying this is something that sounds very spiritual. It's not about numbers. Well, if you've only got 3, 3's a number. But you need to know how many you got. And if you're a shepherd and you don't know how many sheep you got, you're a bad shepherd. It's not about how many are showing up, but how many are we have stewardship for? And do we want to say? And we'd like to adopt the 23 third graders at May Elementary School across the street from us. Right? Who are going to be ours? And so this it just feels like whenever I hear churches in a tug of war about numbers, it's not about numbers, it is about numbers. We're missing the point. The truth is, it's about the right numbers. Let me take a breath there after these 3 sidetrack questions. You got really quiet there when I started talking about numbers. Anything you want to push back on or want to talk about?
I think that response is more about, I grew up in a small church of about 45 people total, and we always felt like we weren't good enough because we weren't the big church. And I think it's more of a reflex, like, no, we're good. It's not about the numbers because it's not about being the 1,000-member church. It's about being us.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying, but I guess it's sort of...
Yeah, it's not about being bigger.
Right.
Bigger is not necessarily better. But there's a faithfulness in knowing this is our group. This is our group.
I think too many things in the church are measured by numbers.
Yeah. Say more about that.
Our important congregations are the ones over 450. If you plan to be a successful congregation, you're really going to need at least 150 people. The percentage of giving in our church is much better than XYZ.
Yeah.
The number of young people we have is larger than XYZ over here. Numbers.
Yeah, so it's easy to, I think that's really helpful because there are some numbers that are not helpful. And then they're just a core, like, I just have a few that I like to keep up with, like, how many babies do I have? Like, who am I, in our ministry, how many kids do I have responsibility for and how many families? I'd like to know that. How often did we follow up with our people who visited? I think that's a valuable one. But I think a lot of the numbers you described, like, some of you couldn't hear back there, but he was just describing some norms, like, what they say is if you're going to be a thriving church, you got to have at least 450 members, or at some level 150 members means you got, and sort of the being driven by those expectations of outside numbers. And especially in smaller churches, I got to tell you, let me give you another metaphor. Who's the investment guy?
Schwab.
What's it? Schwab. No, it's a, but you're close. The older guy gave a lot of money to Bill Gates.
Warren Buffett?
Warren Buffett, yeah. Warren Buffett said, I read this recently, it's fascinating. Warren Buffett said, if I had just $1 million, if I had just $1 million, and not my billions, if I had just $1 million, I could give you a 50% return on it anytime. But I have too much money. He says, when I invest my billions, it changes the market so quickly that I can't make that kind of return. But if I had just $1 million, if I was small, and I had just $1 million, I could make an incredible return. I think the same is true in churches. I think smaller churches have this incredible advantage. And the smaller churches that I have looked at, it is not unusual for them to see 75 to 80% of their children and youth coming on any given week. In a larger church, it's going to be 30 to 40%. But in a smaller church, 75 to 80% participating, they feel involved, they feel engaged. There's magical things happening there. And I think that there are things that in a smaller church that I just envy. When I talk to small church pastors and they say, what do I do? You know, I have this friend who used to be a youth director for a church with 30 or 40 kids, and she's moved to this church and there are 4 or 5 kids. She's the pastor. There are 4 or 5 kids. I said, you have a minivan. Just put the kids in your minivan and go to Sonic and ask for prayer requests. That's going to be so much easier with you know, that kind of. So if you are in a smaller church, I hope you leave here with a superiority complex. You have a huge advantage. And I think, frankly, I think that's where churches are going. I think that we're always going to have the kind of mega churches, but the middle-sized churches are going to shrink, and you're going to have many more smaller churches. If we can figure out how to do it as a denomination, I think we're beautifully positioned to really create these authentic communities of, 50 to 150 people. I think there's some real hope there. Of course, not that that's what we're talking about. It is on video. I hope that's okay. One last image I want to give you, and that is the image of underground youth ministry. Whether you have a program or not, like, let me just give you the example in my church. I have kids who never come to our youth program, who are being discipled and nurtured in the life of the church. So I have young people who help out in the music program, and they never come to youth Sunday school, they never come to youth group, they never come to small group, but they are fully integrated into the life of the church. I've got others who have taught children Sunday school. They never come to youth ministry things. In some churches, that would be considered a failure. To me, it is a great success. That there are programs that we invite our kids into, but more importantly, we want them embedded into the whole life of the church, the youth ministry underground. Every church can do this, and typically smaller churches do it so much more naturally than the larger churches. Okay, we're nearing the end of our time. We just open it up for any sort of closing comments, questions that you might want to raise. Okay? Yeah. Well, I have one last little video clip for you, and then we'll play. Okay. There we go.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-dry short hairs. Well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here. And if you look at his face, it is ripped to shreds, you know?
You see the movies, you hear the stories. I'm living the dream. Not everyone can do it.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost to one of them, it ain't feeling like in the world.
Let's pray together. Lord, we thank you for the wildness of working with the next generation, for the ways that it highlights and shines a spotlight on our need for your grace, on how we feel like you're so far over our heads sometimes. And so, Lord, I pray for the congregations represented today, that these would be places where the radical welcome, hospitality of the Holy Spirit would be so evident, and where young people grow to live into the dreams that you've had for them. We're grateful for these couple hours we've gotten to spend together, for the ministry that's happening beneath the surface that none of us will ever probably learn about. A few of us will. But we give you thanks that your Spirit is at work all over this Presbytery. And we pray your blessing on these who will seek to bring a herd into town and not lose one.